My name is Marcus Reed. I'm 38 years old, and until one Thursday night in March, I believed I had the kind of life people write letters of gratitude about. I live in a brick colonial in the Ballantine area of Charlotte, North Carolina, with my wife Danielle and our two kids, Sophie, who's 6, and Jacob, who's 4. I coach Sophie's soccer team on Saturdays. I coach Jacob's confusion about the rules of soccer on the sidelines. We had a life that looked, from the outside, complete. That Thursday, Danielle asked me to sit down after the kids were asleep. She was shaking before she even opened her mouth. She told me she'd been having an affair with a coworker, a man named Trevor from her marketing firm, for about 8 months. I remember feeling the floor tilt slightly, the way it does right before you faint. I asked her if that was everything. She hesitated too long. Then she told me the second part, the part that actually broke something permanent in me. She said there had been someone else, on and off, for almost the entire 6 years of our marriage. My best friend, Dale Whitfield, the man I'd known since college, the man who was Jacob's godfather. I didn't yell, I didn't leave. I told her I needed the truth, all of it, before I could decide anything about us, about the kids, about any of it. She agreed. What I didn't tell her was that agreeing to give me the truth and actually being capable of it were two very different things, and I intended to find out everything myself, with or without her help. The memories started rearranging themselves almost immediately. Dale used to come over most weekends, ostensibly to watch football, help with yard work, be there for us as a family friend. I remembered late-night texts on Danielle's phone that she always explained away as work stuff. I remembered a stretch of 18 months where she took frequent short work trips to Raleigh, always overnight, always urgent. I remembered credit card statements with charges I never questioned because I trusted her completely. I started quietly. I didn't confront anyone yet. I opened a new bank account and moved half our joint savings into it, on my divorce attorney's advice. A woman named Renata Ose, who specialized in cases exactly like mine. I began backing up every phone, every email, every cloud account I could access, most of which Danielle allowed access to, either out of guilt or out of some instinct that resistance would only make things worse for her later. The financial records were the first real crack. I found hotel bookings in Raleigh going back nearly 4 years, most charged to a card I didn't recognize, a secondary card Danielle had opened without my knowledge. I found matching charges from Dale's card on the same nights, same city, same hotel chain. The work trips had a pattern, and the pattern had a name. Then came the phone backups. Renata connected me with a digital forensics contractor named Priya, who specialized in recovering deleted text threads. What she pulled from an old cloud backup of Danielle's previous phone turned my stomach. Years of messages between Danielle and Dale, some tender, some venomous, revealing a relationship far more twisted than a simple affair. Dale had, on multiple occasions, threatened to tell me everything if Danielle tried to end things with him. He held her secrets over her like a debt she could never fully repay. It wasn't just betrayal, it was control, wrapped in the language of love. I found something else buried in those messages that I wasn't prepared for. References to pills. Danielle had developed a dependence on prescription anxiety medication somewhere in the middle of all this, sourced partly through a coworker at her firm who wasn't Trevor, a woman named Kayla who worked in HR and had access to a doctor willing to overprescribe for a price. Danielle had been managing panic attacks, guilt, and the sheer exhaustion of maintaining 2 secret relationships for years, medicating herself quietly while I assumed she was just tired from work and motherhood. Around this time, I started noticing how many people had known. A neighbor, Mr. Halloran, mentioned offhand one afternoon that he'd seen Dale's truck in our driveway plenty of late evenings when I was traveling for my job. Figured he was just keeping Danielle company, he said, like it was nothing. A woman from Danielle's old book club let it slip during a stiff, awkward conversation that everyone kind of knew something was going on with Dale, but nobody felt it was their place to say anything. That silence stung almost as much as the affairs themselves. An entire circle of people had watched my family being quietly dismantled and decided it wasn't their business. I hired a private investigator, a retired Charlotte Mecklenburg detective named Walt Higgins, mostly to establish a clean, admissible timeline for the custody portion of what I now knew would be a divorce. Walt pulled security footage from a gas station near the Raleigh Hotel, showing Danielle's car and Dale's truck arriving within 20 minutes of each other on 4 separate occasions over the past year alone. He also uncovered that Dale had constructed alibis for some of these nights by telling his own wife, Kristen, that he was helping me with home renovation projects I knew nothing about. Kristen had believed him completely. She had no idea her husband had used our friendship as cover for years. The twist that changed everything came almost 2 months into my investigation. I'd noticed Jacob, our younger son, didn't share much resemblance to me the way Sophie did, something I'd brushed off 100 times as just genetics being unpredictable. Sitting in Renata's office one afternoon, going over custody logistics, she gently suggested, given everything else that had surfaced, that a paternity test might be something I'd want for my own peace of mind before finalizing any custody arrangement. I sat with that suggestion for 3 days before I could bring myself to act on it. The results came back 3 weeks later. Jacob was not biologically mine. He was Dale's son. I won't pretend that news didn't nearly destroy me. But somewhere in the wreckage of that moment, something in me went quiet and clear instead of explosive. Jacob was still my son in every way that mattered, the one I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, sat with through ear infections and nightmares. Biology didn't get to rewrite 4 years of fatherhood, but it did get to rewrite everything about how I understood the deception I'd been living inside. I confronted Danielle with everything at once in Renata's office, with the full record laid out. The hotel receipts, the recovered messages, the gas station footage, the prescription records, the paternity results. She didn't try to argue any of it. She cried. And she admitted that the guilt of the secret about Jacob had been eating her alive for years, that it was part of why she'd stayed tangled up with Dale even when she wanted out, because ending things with him meant risking he'd tell me the truth about Jacob's father on his terms instead of hers. I confronted Dale separately, calmly, with Walt Higgins sitting beside me as a witness. I laid out the evidence the same way, methodically, without raising my voice. Dale tried the same tired excuses men like him always try, that it just happened, that he'd always regretted it, that our friendship had complicated things. I told him the only thing I needed to say, that our friendship had ended the moment he decided to spend years lying to my face in my own living room, and that he would be hearing from my attorney regarding both a paternity matter and a formal disclosure to his wife Kristen, who deserved the same truth I'd fought to uncover. The fallout spread wider than I expected. Kristen filed for divorce from Dale within a month. Trevor, Danielle's co-worker, was quietly let go from the marketing firm after Kayla's role in the prescription situation came to light during an internal review, triggered by questions Renata's office raised. Several of the mutual friends who'd stayed silent for years found their friendship with me didn't survive the revelation of what they'd chosen not to tell me. The divorce process took the better part of a year. Renata built an airtight case that protected my finances, given the deception involved, and secured a fair custody arrangement for both kids, because whatever Jacob's biology, no court and no version of me was interested in erasing him from the only family he'd ever known. Danielle didn't fight me on custody. I think some part of her understood that the greatest kindness left between us was giving our children stability instead of another battle. I won't tell you, the year that followed was easy. There were nights I sat in Jacob's room after he fell asleep and just watched him breathe, working through feelings I didn't have clean names for. There was therapy, a lot of it, for me, and eventually for Danielle too, separately. There were mornings I woke up and, for just a second, forgot, and then remembered all over again. But somewhere in the rebuilding, I found something I hadn't expected: clarity. I became a steadier father than I'd ever been, present in a way that busyness and blind trust had maybe let me avoid before. I rebuilt my finances, my friendships, my sense of who I was outside the story I'd been told about my own marriage. People ask me sometimes if I regret not confronting Dale and Danielle the night I found out everything, if I wish I'd exploded, said everything I felt in that first raw moment. I don't, because what I learned, slowly, methodically, evidence by evidence, wasn't just the truth about what they'd done. It was the truth about what I was capable of when everything I trusted fell apart, and it turns out I was capable of a lot more calm and a lot more strength than any of them ever gave me credit for. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying the people who betrayed me. It was refusing to let their betrayal define the rest of my life, or my son's. If you were in Marcus's position, could you have stayed as patient as he did? Or would you have confronted everyone the moment you found out? Let me know in the comments below, and if this story kept you hooked till the end, hit subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from.